Hi, I'm Dino, and I appreciate you stopping by to explore my new channel. If this is your first time visit, I am absolutely thrilled to meet you, and if you're returning, welcome back. I have a deep fascination for rocks, minerals, crystals, the origins of the universe, and the mysteries of our existence. My aim is to provide you with information that is both helpful and entertaining as we journey along this crystal road together. As I mentioned earlier, our next conversation will focus on Dino's early life. For the first 10 years, nothing particularly remarkable occurred. I was simply an energetic young child of about 10 years old. When I turned 10, my parents relocated to a distant place, which was quite a significant change for me as a young person. I spent my entire life, a whole 10 years, in Missouri. The Midwest was all that I ever knew. For most 10-year-old children in the 60s, my world felt rather small, and leaving town was like a thrilling experience. But leaving the state was like a celebrity status. My parents, they embarked on their journey to live in Colorado. They shared with me stunning images of these towering mountains, and I was completely captivated. I was sold. It was beautiful. It's like, wow. For this young individual, I felt like truly stepping onto another planet, as we were going to have our future play out there. As the time approached for our big move, the excitement began to grow. We had sold our house. There was just a month till the closing date. With everything falling into place, my father, my mother, and I, we loaded the car with our clothes and a few of our belongings in a trailer behind us, and we set off for this distant land of Colorado. I was informed that the journey would take 2 days, which to a 10-year-old in 1969, that would be like an endless interstellar adventure. The 1960s, it was a time that you didn't have internet, you didn't have computers or cell phones, LED lights, remote controls, TVs were primarily black and white. There was rich people that had like the early versions of the color TV, but it wasn't until in the 70s that I seen my first color TV. I will say that most people had landline phones at that time. There's still a few people that had multiple line phones. I forgot what they're called back then, but there would be like 7 people would share one phone line, and a certain ring would be a different person. But anyway, that's like ancient history now. We can't even think about anything like that. One of the neighborhood kids next to me in Missouri, he had one of those reel-to-reel recorders that would record your voice. It would capture it. And I was so impressed. I thought he was the coolest guy I ever knew. Well, while communication was possible back then, it's pretty basic, antique compared to what we have now. In 1969, humans already had walked on the moon, leading us to think that at that time in 1969 and 1970, mankind was at their peak pinnacle of achievement. Little did we know how much more advanced we would become, in the following years. So anyway, the long-awaited day to embark on our trip to Colorado finally arrived. Hooray! And we traveled down Highway 72. At that time, we didn't really have the internet system like what we've got now. So my dad, he'd be flying 80 mile an hour or as fast as the car would go. And when it come to a little town, he'd have to slow down to 30 miles an hour because there's usually a traffic light. So we lived on the Mississippi side, the Mississippi River side. So we had to take and drive all the way across Missouri And then we had to go to Kansas and then drive all the way through Kansas and then halfway through Colorado to get to our destination. And it was going to take 2 full days or more to do that. Well, the first few hours of the journey were thrilling. It was like, wow, we're on the road. But soon, to a 10-year-old, that excitement faded away and it started to be monotonous. We sat for hours gazing out the window, and we'd see the same scenery whizzing by as we would go. The summer heat was incredible, and it was not comfortable because most of the cars at that time didn't have air conditioning, and ours did not have air conditioning either. So eventually, after crossing the Kansas border, my dad decided to stop for the night and booked a motel around 11 p.m. I can't remember what kind of a little cowboy motel we stayed in, but it was situated in a tiny little town. We were all wore out from a long, sweltering, hot, dusty day. The following morning, I felt a rush of excitement again, and I realized that we were going to be in Colorado that day. And I'm like, wow, okay, I'm ready for it. So we took out. As we're going down the road, it still looked just the same as yesterday's road. There weren't any changes at all on the horizon. I can only imagine how exasperated I must have been for my parents. The landscape in Kansas was completely flat in every direction that you would look. My dreams were totally crushed. I thought to myself, why did we leave our beautiful green trees of Missouri with rivers and hills for this? Well, not to mention the miles and miles of pig farms, which added a rather undesirable aroma scent to our journey. My mom reassured me that there are mountains in Colorado. After all, she showed me pictures of them. And indeed, she did show me pictures, and they were nice looking pictures. But I was getting to lose my confidence. I was advised to keep an eye out for the mountains. I'm like, really? Mountains? Okay, I'll look for mountains. Well, I spent hour and hour, looking and seeing clouds and shapes of clouds, thinking, well, maybe that's a mountain, maybe that's a mountain. It wasn't. So eventually I got tired. I dozed up, and I woke up a few hours later to find some uneven lines stretching halfway up in the sky. It was mountains. A rush of adrenaline surged through me as I began to feel a little bit more worthwhile to our journey. With each passing hour, towering mountains drew ever closer. After only seeing the hills in Missouri, these mountains were huge like that. And I thought, something extraordinary is unfolding, finally. We likely drove through the dark into a big city called Pueblo, Colorado, and we stopped at another motel there. Well, I couldn't contain my excitement for the next day. I was just all jazzed up. I recall my dad driving from there up towards Denver, and he was eager to reach the Rocky Mountain National Park. I think it was called Estes National Park. I don't remember. I'm just pulling that out of memory. Everywhere I turned, the scenery was stunning. It was, after spending all these days on this flat and then to see trees and mountains, it was spectacular. We stayed there for probably about 3 days camping, and then we drove to a mountain town called Salida, Colorado. It wasn't as breathtaking as some of the towering peaks that we were in up above Denver, but we had familiar relatives living there, and we were going to meet up with them. I recall in that town that there were stone cabins available for weekly rentals, so that was our destination to live in for a while. My dad, he quickly found work, and his new boss owned a house just right next to his that would be available for rent in a few weeks. So it finally felt like everything was starting to fall into place for our new life. The town was quite small. We grew really fond of the people. The town had beautiful views. Every direction you looked, you had mountains and passes and hillsides with like the letter S on it for the Salida, and there was canyons. It was incredible. It was about 7,000 feet up in the air. And then the really cute thing in that town was there's a little river called the Arkansas River that flows right down through it. And I spent countless hours by its banks looking and adventuring while my dad would be enjoying fishing in the water there. I enjoyed fishing with my dad, but only because it gave me a chance to explore. While waiting, I would explore rocks nearby, and then I noticed that they're so different than those back in Missouri. In Missouri, I didn't know what they were called, but it was like carnelian and quartz, and maybe it was a little jasper in with it, but they were not bright colors, but they were different colors. All these rocks were just like gray speckled granite, and they had mica and glittery things around on them. Well, I heard people talking in Salida about mines, which was interesting, and gold and silver. And it was fascinating to listen to all their tall tales about discovering gold nuggets and veins of silver. And then they'd always be some reason why they couldn't find them again. And I'm thinking, well, once you find something, how could you lose it? But that was what they would always say. When I was in the banks fishing with my dad, or he was fishing, there was all these sparkly gold flakes in the water. And I was starting to think, wow, we got gold here. Then I learned later it was actually mica. It's so abundant in Colorado. It's in all the streams. They all glitter like they got gold in them. Well, at 10 years old, in the 60s, money didn't hold much significance for me yet. But there was something captivating about the stones and the minerals in this area that wakened a new sense of purpose in me. It felt like a child was struck by gold fever. I can't explain exactly why or how it happened, but it did. Within a few days in Colorado, I discovered a new form of direction in my life. I realized that I am a thoughtful, decision-making individual, driven by some insatiable urge to collect rocks and minerals. I became enhanced by the idea of being a rock collector. Now we would say an amateur geologist. And I believe my parents were finally relieved to see that I'm finally engaging in a hobby that would keep me busy. The front of this rock cabin where we stayed at, that was like a hotel, had a small store in the front of it that offered like snacks and cigarettes, beers, soda, and along with it, it had like a little curio section for tourists. And I noticed books and magazines and maps about Colorado, guides on rocks and minerals, and sample sheets of rocks and minerals. And anyway, I bought this little sample box. It was a little thin box about like this thick, and I don't know, 18 by 12, and it had probably 30 little stones on it, and it had the name of them and where that they're located at in the state of Colorado. And I thought, man, that is so cool. It had all these stones from around our area. I seen some of these that were laying around, and I started to relate with that. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to find every single one of these. I never did, but it was fun trying. I saved up enough money to purchase a book, and it was called Rocks and Minerals. In fact, I still got that book. This is the book that I got back in 1969. Now, the copyright on it is 1957. But you know, the information in this little book is still applies today. It's the same information that we're taught, and the only thing is some of the pictures are antique. They got old cars and stuff in them, but yeah, it gives you a really good basic on how to take and go out and collect rocks and minerals, and to figure out what kind of a rock or mineral that it is. So anyway, it kept me captivated, getting this book, and it awoken a new sense of purpose within me. I felt like a child that was struck by gold fever. I guess you could have called it stone fever at that time. Along with this, the small 12 by 18 box that was filled with stones, it felt like my own little private pirate chest. I spent countless hours outdoors. All my time was outdoors, exploring every dirt road. I was kicking over stones. I had developed this newfound passion for fishing with my dad so that I could take and look for rocks. Well, during my time in this rustic cabin, I began with a small little candy box tin to put my stones in. Then I moved on to a coffee can. And then eventually I had this big old army canvas bag that I was putting my rocks in. This book on the rocks and mineral guides shows you how to search for rocks, the necessary equipment to hunt for them, and as you can see, I still have it. As the years passed, my father ventured deeper and deeper into the high mountains to fish, and I went with him. I brought along my fishing pole and my tackle box, but I was far more captivated by all the stones and prospects of discovering new rocks or gold. One day he hiked up into the mountains to fish, he was doing his usual way of he'd cast 3 times and nothing would bite. He'd take and he'd walk and he'd go somewhere else, and he'd always be walking upstream. Meanwhile, while he was doing this, I was exploring the hills, and I was examining the banks and the rugged rocks for anything that I could put into my collection. And one of those times, I really did make a remarkable discovery. I found an entire selection of beautiful blue rocks. I'd never seen blue rocks before. I was so excited, I lost track of time. My dad had went on, 20, 30, 40 minutes fishing. I was still there. I found myself trying to pry a piece of that blue rock out of the bank. I didn't have any hammers. I didn't have a pick or a shovel or anything. I didn't even have a pocket knife. So I took another rock and I was beating on it till I finally got 2 little pieces the size of my fist. And I didn't have a way to put it in my tackle box because I had a little bitty one of them aluminum tackle boxes, so nothing would fit in it. I had to put them in my pants pocket. So I finally got those out of there and decided it's time to meet my dad. And I went upstream a little bit, and he's nowhere to be found. So I know, well, he usually goes upstream, so I went upstream, but the stream went into 2 little streams, and I didn't know if he went this way or if he went that way. So I went one way, and I walked and walked and walked, and he wasn't there. So I backtracked, and I took the other one, and no, he wasn't there either. So frantically, I realized I was surrounded by this rugged terrain out in the middle of nowhere. There's boulders and trees everywhere. Everything looks the same no matter which way you look. And to make matters worse, it was starting to get dark. I sat there feeling as if the whole world is coming to an end, and the darkness is starting to get dark around the edges, and I completely was at a loss of what to do. I ended up, I was 10 years old. I was just bawling my head off there. And had all these whirlwinds of emotions going around, and then all of a sudden, my dad approached from behind me and gently said, "It's time to leave, it's starting to get dark." He noticed the tears in my eyes, like I'd hurt myself, and I was so happy to see him. I just grabbed him, and it was such a joy. I forgot all about those rocks in my pants. But we got home, and we arrived after night. And I was so happy to be at home. I pulled those rocks out. I threw them in that bag, and it just sat there for months. Well, months later, my parents had some friends over, and it was like a childhood show and tell kind of a contest. My parents, they were sharing stories of my mom's delicious recipes, and my dad, the cars that he worked on. And then I came out all proud with my bag of rocks, and of course, people were polite to me. They spent a little bit of time looking at what I had, but I really had a pretty disappointing little collection. It was nothing more than rocks that you would find in your driveway. But while I was there showing these driveway rocks off, one guy, he looked at the blue rocks and he picked them up and he said, "Dino, where'd you get this?" And all of a sudden I'm like, I was fishing with my dad and I found them by the bank. I didn't want to be in trouble if maybe somebody would think that I'd stole them or something. And he said, "Do you know where you got it at?" And I'm like, "Just up there somewhere." He said, "Do you think you could find those again?" And I'm telling him, "Well, sure, yeah. Next time I go with my dad, I'll go see if I can get a couple more." And so anyway, it was somewhere up on Poncha Pass, Mount Chavano area. And I went fishing with my dad several times up there again, and everything looks the same. I never could find. I promised to try to find those for that guy, but I never could. So I was another story like all the other people that found gold and silver and they couldn't find it again. Well, it happened to me too. That blue rock, this guy didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. But looking back, I believe I stumbled across a small vein of lapis lazuli. And this is lapis lazuli. I don't know if you can see the nice blue colors here, but that's lapis lazuli. That's pretty much native to Afghanistan. And I researched it, and after I discovered the different things about it, not only is it located in Afghanistan, but there's some spots in Chile, Lake Baikal in Siberia, Russia, and then there's some smaller pockets that are in Angola, Canada, United States, and Colorado, and Pakistan. Yes, Colorado. Okay, there's a place 50 miles from where we were fishing. It's called, let's see my notes here, Blue Wrinkle Mine, located in Crested Butte, Colorado. And it may be a vein that would be connected maybe down underneath the ground and then came up, and it's hard to say how it would have got there, but it very well could have been lapis lazuli. It looks just like as I remember as a kid. I never was able to find it again. So this little discovery became an obsession for me that I couldn't shake off. I had an uncle who was hunting in a similar area of Colorado, and he mentioned a massive silver vein on the side of a hill when he was hunting. And he looked around, he said, "Okay, I know where it's at. I'm going to come back here, and we're going to make some money here." Well, he was never able to find it again. It's lost too. So we kind of forgot about making the big money, just go out and have fun. In Salida, Colorado, I think it's north of there, there's a place, it's a park called Ruby Mountain, and I believe it's still there to this day. And there's garnets all over on the hillside where you park at for this park. And they're beautiful. Most of them are little bitty guys, and then maybe some little bit bigger ones. I mean, when you hold them to the sun, they have that ruby color, and that's why it's called Ruby Park. And I got all sorts of these when I was a kid. I got a little can full of these garnets, and it's in like like a volcanic ash, and you chip it out of that, and it's just a perfect, like you would have in a ring. It was so cool looking. I got lots of those, and then during that period of time, I have another uncle who still resided in Missouri, and he worked in a deep earth mine, and he come to visit us in Colorado. He found out that I was starting to collect rocks and minerals, and he surprised me with a gift of quartz or fluorite crystals that came from inside that mine. This was my introduction to a genuine crystal. So later I came across some iron pyrite cubes for sale, and I decided to buy them. So that was like the first mineral stone that I bought besides this package. And it went from there. I couldn't get enough. My parents, they made a decision to locate to a different town in Colorado for health reasons, and it was sad to leave this beautiful countryside. But I had hoped that the next town would have an adventure too, and it did. We moved to a place called Canyon City, and we found a little farmhouse just outside of town, and I was surrounded by nature and orchard trees, and there was just few neighbors. I was getting ready to go into the 7th grade that year, and I found myself biking down the road for the first time. And along the way, I look off to the side, and I'm like, whoa, there's like an old rundown shack off the road, and there's a driveway lined with rocks and crystals. So, the curious rock hound that I am, I kind of park my bike there, and I start walking over. It looked like a deserted house. Nobody was living in it. And I approached to take a closer look, and I guess I crossed the line by walking a bit farther than I should have up in the driveway. And I was looking at these incredibly huge crystals lying in the dirt on this driveway. This house seemed uninhabited, and this is why I let my guard down, and I just kept looking and looking at these crystals. I was just drawn to them. Suddenly I heard a noise, a bang, and the door burst open to reveal this old man that resembled like an old mountain man, just like Grizzly Adams. By the way, Grizzly Adams was a popular 70s show about a mountain man that lived with a bear. Well, this guy looked just like him. He was tall, he was intimidating, he had a voice that could send chills down your spine. I nearly lost my composition. He shouted a scream of profanities at me and threatened to shoot me if I returned and caused any trouble. I was petrified. I couldn't move. I just stood there. And I started to stutter out that I was the neighbor who just moved in down the street last week. He approached me and he said, no, he says, you're not one of them. And then I said, sir, I've never been down your road before. And I said, you sure have beautiful rocks everywhere. And I just wanted to look at them. I swear that's all. Well, his tone softened immediately. And he asked if you really like rocks. And I enthusiastically said to him, yeah, I've been collecting for a few years, but this is the most incredible collection of rocks that I have ever seen. He smiled, and he asked me my name. I told him, I'm Dino, and he introduced himself to me. I think it was Edward or something. I can't really remember. Then he wholeheartedly apologized for his earlier accusations, explaining that some kids around my age had been coming and vandalizing his property, throwing rocks at his windows and stealing things, and he regretted mistaking me for one of them. Then he invited me to follow him, And despite being shooken from my initial encounter, I did feel welcome to this guy. He gave me a friendly pat on the back, which surprised me. I mean, it was a total change. He took me on a tour of his home, which felt like a step back into history, like the old West in the 1800s. Against his house, there were slabs of agate, I guess, and piles of quartz and large. I mean, he had huge quartz crystals, and I didn't know much about rocks or names or anything. I struggled to identify most of them. But he eagerly he pointed out each one, explaining, well, this is quartz crystals over here, and this is tiger's eye over here, and this is obsidian here, this is amethyst here, and he told me where he got them, which I truly had no idea where those places were. Remember, I'm just a little kid from Missouri. So I was both amazed and overwhelmed by his knowledge of these rocks and crystals and all the different things that he had around there. He had a wealth of knowledge about these. Well, he welcomed me to come by any time to see his entire collection. And after marveling at all those stunning specimens, I knew it was time to leave. So I hopped on my bike and I pedaled home, and I was hardly able to believe what had just happened. I was eager to share my discovery with my parents, and they said, you stay away from that guy, because I guess somebody said that, he's just a really ornery old guy. He gives everybody a hard way to go. And I wanted to take and tell my parents about him, but I decided I better just hold off on that. So for a week or two, I stayed away, and my parents told me to ride your bike in an opposite direction. Don't go close to him. They don't want any trouble. But I had this irresistible urge to go back to him, because I knew he wasn't like that. He was a good guy. And it was these other kids that were causing problems. He wasn't a problem causer. So I went back over there. I snuck into his place. I biked up to the side door of his shack, and without even knocking, he just bounced out of the shack, and he called me by name. He said, "Hi, Dino," and expressed how glad he was to see me again. I mean, he was incredibly kind. He asked if I remembered any of the names of a couple of stones. I'm like, boy, it's like I went to school here. It's like he's testing me. I could only recall a few, and he probably chuckled because I mispronounced them. And he invited me inside. Well, bing, 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 a warning bell rang off in my head, reminding me that I shouldn't enter a stranger's house. Yet I grappled with that and my hesitation, but my curiosity won, and I stepped inside. My first impression was shock at how someone could live in such a condition. The floor was almost dirt. There was maybe 3 windows, a refrigerator, a couch, a sink with a table beside it, which I assume served as both a food prep and a dining area, and a chair. It wasn't exactly a place that you would invite guests. However, in the center of that large room, there were several machines on a massive workbench that he had, and it was all covered. The whole place was covered in stone dust. There was one large window adorned with these thin layers of like cut agate, and it was like a mosaic that he had. I don't know, it was dozens of them. It was just beautiful. You could see through them. He had diamond cutting blade saws, he had grinders and polishers, magnifying glasses, microscopes on that bench. He told me that he was a lapidarist and a jeweler in his younger years. And he was delighted to share his passion for transforming rocks into beautiful art to someone like me. Well, I felt pretty special. I marveled at all these hundreds, maybe thousands of little creations he had all over in his shack. I mean, his living space was a mess, but his work was stunning. It was incredible. He explains each piece of equipment and its purpose. He even cut a small piece of agate and gave it to me, and he showed me how the saw worked, and I was completely amazed. I think he even let me operate that machine. I dreamt of it, owning one of those someday, and I wanted one of every kind of stone that he had. I wanted to take and make beautiful jewelry and cut stones like what he did. It was incredible to take and see. Well, eventually it was time for me to leave, and a few days later I returned, but there were several cars parked all around outside, so I hesitated to intrude, and another couple of days went by. I came back, and there was a chain across the driveway with a lock on it. And I did go up to the door and knocked on it, but there wasn't any answer. I tried again a few days later, same result. Unfortunately, my parents found a new home a couple of miles away, and we moved to that. They bought a home instead of renting the farm that we were at. Weeks later, I rode my bike a few miles back to his shack just to find that it was still chained off. And later I informed my parents that I'd been up to see the old guy on the road, and they said, "Oh, didn't you know? He passed away a few weeks ago." And I'm like, "Oh, man." So then I broke down and I shared my entire story with my parents. You know, I can only hope that this old guy, he found joy in our conversation during his last days. I mean, I was devastated. I felt that even just meeting 2, maybe 3 times, we grew really close. And I think he genuinely liked me. Well, during my high school years, my parents relocated once again, this time to northern Idaho. I was reluctant to move, but I don't have any choice in the matter. I'm a teenager at home. I got to go with my parents. The only real adventure I had there was to go hiking in the Salmon River Wilderness for about 7 days. I went with a 70-year-old friend of the family, which was also my guitar teacher. He had a placer claim on this river, and it was about 7 miles from the closest road. So it took most of the day to hike there, and it was really rugged, up and down and around the rivers. He showed me how to live on the land. There was an apple orchard at his cabin, and another young man came to hunt for bear there. The young man did get a bear, and we had fresh meat that tastes like bacon from that bear. We had flour biscuits and plenty of fresh water from the river. At that time, you didn't have to worry about contamination in water because it was so far away from the cities that you didn't have to even think about pollution back then. So this old man, he showed me his cabin that he made from the trees in that spot where he had his gold mine. And looking at his gold mine, it wasn't my idea of a gold mine. It was more like a hole in the ground that had dirt falling in on it. Anyway, we were both there digging, and we took buckets of dirt over to the river so that we could take and pan for the gold. He explained to me how to look at a vision of how the water would come through the valleys, and to remember that the gold is always heavier and it will always eddy behind a rock. And he pointed to this one boulder that was about the size of a truck, just right over from his cabin. And he said he'd figured out that spot would be the best place to find a lot of gold. The only problem was it would be under about 10 feet of water. But we did dig around this big boulder for, I don't know, probably a day. And only thing that we could get there was like this really fine microscopic flour gold there. But once you experience finding a little gold, it gives you gold fever. It just does something to you. You don't want to stop. You almost bloody your fingers trying to dig for this gold. It's hard to really explain. Well, after this period of time, I suppose my passion for rock collecting was put on hold for quite a while. Life began to present more challenges and responsibilities. I graduated from high school, then college. I got married. Soon after, we welcomed 2 children into the world. Time seemed to fly by as I focused on survival. It felt like a cycle of work, eat, sleep, and repeat. I made an effort to camp with my kids, hoping to instill into them some sense of nature and beauty of living things. And at that time, I lived in the mountains of Oregon. I enjoyed hiking through the ancient volcanic lava flows, estimated to be about 1,000 years old, and it was just right by the house that we lived in. We just walked over to it. I did try to do some gold painting, but I wasn't successful at finding any. I did reside there for probably 6 or 7 years, and then I ended up moving to Arizona because it was hard to find work in Oregon. So I lived in Arizona for about 10 years. I continued to take the kids on hikes into the desert and the Superstition Mountains. And after many years, I kind of rediscovered my interest in collecting rocks. A friend introduced me to a small hill near Apache Junction, known for its Apache teardrops, which is obsidian in the shape of like a teardrop. And it's obsidian glass drops formed by ancient volcanic activity, mixed with a gray substance called perlite, I believe. I collected enough to fill a coffee can, and then we left. Well, a few years later, I thought it would be a family fun thing and adventurous to return to this hill and dig around and showing my kids these fascinating little gems. I could vaguely remember how to get there because everything seemed different. There were no trespassing signs lining the fence. There were no trespassing signs. I mean, there were signs there, but it was on the fence, but it wasn't on the road. We were on the road, and I really didn't think much of it at the time. As we approached the top of the hill, I encountered a cowboy on a horse, and he had his gun pointed at me and my family. I froze. I was in the car, and I completely froze, unsure of what to do. He gestured for me to approach him. So I'm thinking, well, what choice do I have? You know, he's got the gun. So I'm trembling. I'm probably like 30 years old at this time. And I exit the car. I walk over, standing before him as he held his weapon at my face. He asked, "What are you doing here?" And I could barely speak, but I managed to say, "I was taking my family to see the Apache teardrops." And he informed me it's private property out here, and if I saw all the signs. I said, yeah, I did see the signs, and I assured I wasn't going to take and cross the fence or trespass. He chuckled, and he revealed that the entire area, including the road, was now his. I expressed my surprise, explaining I'd visited this just years prior with a friend, and we hunted for Apache teardrops there. He then lowered his gun and he explained that he purchased the land to stop people from holding drinking parties and littering, and as long as we don't leave any trash behind, he said, you're welcome to come up here anytime. I thanked him and bid goodbye, and I returned to the car, and my heart was still racing. Although we did make it to the hill, my family and I, we were so shaken that we decided not even to get out of the car. We just decided to turn around and go back home. So this experience taught me to respect property rights while you're searching for rocks. And it was the last time I ever visited that place. So even if I'm in Arizona again, I'm probably not going to go there. Living in Arizona sparked a fascination with gold, and it's influenced by the many gold mines and legends like the Lost Dutchman gold mine. I took the kids to Tombstone, which features a silver mine, and we visited Vulture City Gold Mine. I believe it was in Wickenburg, outside northwest of Phoenix. We've been to the Jerome mines, and we've been to Bisbee, and all the places around there that's filled with ghost towns and rock collectors things. We've been to just almost everything there. It was really wonderful. It's an experience there in the desert. I took a trip by myself to visit a different uncle in California in the Sacramento area. And I don't remember what year this was. I think it was in like 1996, somewhere in there. He was wanting me to work for him, and I didn't know if I really wanted to take and make that jump to go move over there to work for him. So one day he drove out of Sacramento up to the hills and the mountains there to a place called Placerville. He showed me a spot where gold was first discovered in 1849, and that's the start of the gold rush. And we went into a few rock shops and museums. I felt that gold fever starting on me again. However, life is life, and I ended up to stay in Arizona. As my children reached their late teens, we made one final move together to Alabama, which after that, everyone kind of went their separate ways. And over time, my collection of rocks grew larger and heavier. I ended up having 2 heavy wooden boxes of rocks. I left them with my parents in their home in Alabama, and I moved to Florida because I had work in Florida. And afterwards, I had to go overseas for a few years. And unbeknownst to me, my parents moved and didn't realize those 2 boxes held my treasured collection. So they discarded them somewhere in the forest behind where they lived at. And they did not take my stones with them to their new house. So I guess the saying is, from earth they came and back to earth they return. So even as I reached my 40s and 50s, I longed to collect one of everything, as if I was living in a natural history museum. However, after I turned 60, something kind of shifted in my life. I can't quite explain. Perhaps it was a realization of aging coupled with persistent pain. I began suffering from kidney stones due to excessive uric acid in my system, and I experienced tinnitus in my hearing. In search of remedies, I discovered something that I'd never heard of before. It was called Reiki, or Reiki. You can say it both ways, which people claim could naturally alleviate physical pains and ailments. Initially, I was skeptical, but testimonials of remarkable healing caught my attention. Reiki is said to connect with the frequency of the universe and our bodies. And being the skeptic person that I am, I researched everything that I could find for evidence and ideas on how everything in the universe works to disprove this. Well, this led me to realize that all rocks, crystals, minerals I'd collected throughout my life possess unique frequency signatures that can impact the human body. Suddenly, it struck me that I had been drawn to these rocks and crystals since childhood without understanding why. Although my lost boxes of rocks were a reflection of my past, at 60 I found renewed passion for collecting them again. Not merely for their beauty, but now recognizing them as powerful healing companions. They feel like family to me. They're like little companions in the universe. They're my little buddies. And this pretty much brings us up to today. So this has been a tale of the story of Dino, from being a little kid to being 67 now, and as of this video. So I'm starting my new journey for the last few years. In the upcoming episodes, we will explore the power of crystals, the various frequencies of crystals, the frequencies within our bodies, how the different elements of Earth impact us. We'll also discuss the interconnectedness of every molecule and atom in the universe, as well as ways to live harmoniously with both the Earth and the cosmos, so we can have a feeling of connectivity to everything. Well, I believe that's a wrap for today. If you have any questions or comments, please share them below. I'd love to hear from you. It would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe and maybe hit that like button if you enjoyed what you heard and you'd like to hear more. And also I can get you a notification of any videos as they come out. So until the next time, see you on that crystal road. Namaste.